And so this idea of trying to fit in, I feel, is always going to be in everything that I write, because that's all I know. Kimbap is about an 11-year-old Korean girl living in Vancouver, and she has to do a project about her heritage. So she decides one day that because she loves Korean food so much that maybe she should do a presentation about Korean food. But she's like third generation Korean Canadian, so her mother doesn't really do a lot of Korean cooking, so she has to ask her grandmother, and she's trying to teach her classmates about her identity as a Korean and not feeling embarrassed about it, but to be proud of it and to share that experience. So I was looking for something Korean Canadian and I couldn't find anything. So that's one of the main reasons I just wrote the book myself, because there didn't seem to be anybody else writing a story for Korean Canadian kids. My first message would be for young Korean Canadian girls and boys to finally see themselves on the cover of a book. I think that it's a powerful thing to see your ethnicity or your culture represented in a children's book. And I think because there aren't any, when a Korean Canadian child goes to the library or goes to the bookstore and sees kimchi on the front cover of a book, I think that that's very meaningful. I think being an immigrant is something that affects you for your whole life. In my high school of, graduating class of 350 kids, maybe 175 Chinese kids, 5 Korean kids. So I always felt like an outsider, always. In my neighborhood, I never hear Korean being spoken. And so I always feel like somehow I don't belong. And I guess that's part of just being an immigrant. And so this idea of trying to fit in, I feel, is always going to be in everything that I write, because that's all I know. Put my whole life out there. So I don't really want to write about me. I like the idea of writing about the general Korean Canadian experience. I was thinking about which Korean foods I could introduce in the story that were accessible to people who are not Korean. And living in Vancouver, there's a sushi restaurant every 5 blocks. So people are very familiar with the idea of sushi. So I thought kimbap would be an easy thing for people who are not Korean to relate to in the book, not just kimbap. So I talk about bulgogi and japchae and kalguksu and stuff like that. I talk about lots of different Korean foods throughout the book. It's one of the main themes of the book. I remember when my publisher sent me the email link to this list of 8 Canadian middle grade books to watch for spring 2018. My heart was just beating like crazy. I couldn't breathe, because I was on this list with these other authors who are very established, very experienced writers, and especially from the CBC, because it's such a Canadian cultural institution. They really want to promote Canadian work, Canadian arts, Canadian literature. So it was a very, very nice surprise, and very happy about it. It was a very nice way to promote this story. Korean Americans or Korean Canadians to go seek out stories that reflect their own immigration story, their own cultural experiences. Koreans don't read stories about Koreans first. Publishers aren't going to publish them. And so we need to show publishers that. I feel like that's a really important thing for the Korean community, to really support Korean writers and to buy their works and to tell them, yes, we're interested in these stories, we want these stories, and we need these stories.